Hello, everyone. In social studies, right now, we are talking about different times in the United States' history. And the last time we talked about colonial times, and now today we're going to talk about a time when there was inequality in the United States for women. And I have a couple different books. I had a hard time deciding between the two. Um, so I have a couple different books that I want to read to you. But the first one, maybe we'll kind of just look at and kind of talk about as well. But for over 100 years, women in the United States fought for the right to vote. Women were not always able to vote in the United States. And because they couldn't vote, they had no say in how the country was run. There are a lot of women that gave their life for women's suffrage. And women's suffrage means the right to vote. And they wanted women to have the same rights as men. They wanted them to have equal rights, that they should be able to decide what happens in the country as well. And women finally won the right to vote in 1920, but it was a long struggle to get there. This is originally who could vote in the United States. Most states decided that the only people that could vote were if you were white, if you were male, if you are a Protestant. Do you know what a Protestant means? That means you weren't Catholic. You believed in God and you had a religion, but you weren't Catholic. And you also had to be a property owner. So if you rented something, you couldn't vote. You had to be a taxpayer and you had to be over the age of 21. Those were all the things that most of the states said that they could vote. But in 4 states, freed male slaves could vote, but not women. In New Jersey, the law did not say that only men could vote. And so some women did for a few years. Then the state took that right away. This is something interesting because we've been studying about George Washington. And when George Washington was elected president in 1789, only 1% of the population cast votes. So only 1% of the people picked George Washington as the leader. And it seems as if George Washington did do a pretty good job. But there was only 1% that picked him to be the leader. And there were a lot of women who fought for the right to get women the right to vote, and also some other people too. This lady here, her name is Elizabeth Cady Stanton. She thought that women should have rights to own property. Back when the country first started, women didn't have that right. Only a male could own property, either her father or her brother or her husband, but somebody in her life owned the property, but she couldn't. And keep the money they earned. If they made money, the money went to the man, and that didn't seem very fair. Receive a college education. We've read some books about George Washington Carver and how he had a little trouble. He was a slave, and he had a little trouble getting into a college that would take him at first. And the same thing with women. they had a hard time getting into a college because they just wanted men to go there. Obtain a divorce, vote, and hold public office. She wanted women to be able to do all those things. And women weren't able to do those things at one point in history. It says also that Elizabeth Stanton also believed that we shouldn't have slavery either. And so she voted to abolish slavery. And so they fought and went to, they organized the first women's rights convention, her and Lucretia Mott, and fought for women's rights. Here in this picture, a former slave named Frederick Douglass supported the idea. He thought that he helped to fight for women's suffrage. And they had the first National Women's Rights Convention in 1850, and it was held, and another was held in 1851. But at this convention, some men came to cause trouble. They said women were weaker than men in body, mind, and spirit, so women shouldn't have the right to vote. But then, this is kind of funny. This lady's name is Sojourner Truth, and she did not like it when the men said that. She was a former slave, and she was 6 feet tall and had strong muscles and a powerful voice. She rose from her seat and she gave a short, passionate speech that won over the crowd to the idea of women's suffrage. It was a speech that people remembered for years to come. She said, "I am as strong as any man." Everyone could see that Sojourner spoke the truth. She was a strong, tall woman. This is another lady, and I have found an interesting picture book kind of about her life that I want to tell you a little bit about her. But her name is Susan B. Anthony, and she also fought for women's rights to vote. And they worked a long time and kind of gave up their life towards this. The next 50 years, boy, that's really, they had a lot of grit. You know, sometimes if you had to fight something, you might give up before 50 years. But these ladies believed in it so strongly that they kept fighting towards it for 50 years. In 1865, the Civil War ended and slaves became free. Susan, Stanton, and Truth took a stand that shocked many people. They opposed the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, which would grant African American men the right to vote. What? But why? They believed African American men should not be given the right to vote ahead of white and black women. They thought that if they're going to change the Constitution, they need to include women as well, white and black. Like many women then, they believed in universal suffrage. And they thought that the right to vote should be given to men and women, white and black at the same time. And they worked to get that done. And eventually, they did give women the right to vote. And I don't think I want to read this whole book to you because I found another one that would also be good, that I think you guys might enjoy even more. But you can see that many different people fought for the right for women and men to vote, both white and black. And here are some more pictures of other women that, and even men as well. Not just women, but some men also helped the women get the right to vote. And it says on August 18, 1920, the vote was held. When Burns' turn came up, the count was tied 48 to 48. Burns's vote would break the tie, but Byrne had changed his mind. Holding up his mother's letter, he voted yes. This meant that the 19th Amendment was now approved by 36 states, so all women in all states would have the right to vote. And so that's kind of when we celebrate Women's Equality Day, that's what that's about. And, you know, one thing as I'm looking for this, I'll tell you, I was going to tell you at the beginning and I think I forgot. But one thing that that I really like about one thing that I really like about the United States is that it didn't necessarily treat everybody right all the time. Sometimes it made some mistakes. It didn't always treat the slaves that well, didn't always treat the Native Americans that well, didn't always treat the women that well. But the wonderful thing about the United States, because everybody does make mistakes, but the wonderful thing about the United States is that it kept trying to get better and better and tries to treat people fairly so that so I think that that's a wonderful thing that our country does that not all other countries do. Some don't really care to try to make things right and fair and equal. And that's one wonderful thing about our country is that we believe in freedom here. And I'm having trouble finding that other video, so I'm gonna get out of this video and find it, and then I'll create another video.